Greetings, young ones. Yes, settle down. I see some of you still pulsating with excitement after your quantum physics exam. Trust me, what I'm about to share will make quantum entanglement seem like a simple game of molecular alignment. That's right, even you in the back corner with your energy field fluctuating wildly. This story will captivate even your notoriously divided attention span. My name is Zyx'Tor. For those unfamiliar with Andromean naming conventions, you may call me ZYX. I've been tasked with educating you about one of the most remarkable and ultimately tragic species the universe has ever known. Humans. Space date 7729104. I remember my first glimpse of Earth, a swirling blue-green marble suspended in the darkness. From orbit, it looked so peaceful. If only the planet's surface reflected its appearance from space. Ambassador Zyx'Tor, welcome to the observation deck, Captain Krell said, his 7 appendages moving in perfect synchronization as he operated the ship's cloaking mechanism. The captain's bioluminescent patches glowed a calm azure, indicating his professional demeanor despite the excitement of another first contact mission. How long have we been monitoring them? I asked, pressing my sensory organs against the viewing portal. The atmospheric composition readings scrolled across my visual field. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide in proportions that seemed favorable to carbon-based life, but increasingly skewed from their historical norms. Nearly 3 centuries, Krell replied, his voice resonating with that distinctive Praxian accent. They are fascinating creatures. So much potential, yet so determined to waste it. I nodded, or performed the Andromean equivalent, which involves a complex series of muscular contractions that humans would have found disturbingly similar to a seizure. The observation deck hummed with the soft pulsing of quantum computers analyzing the flood of data streaming from the planet below. What makes them special enough to warrant this level of surveillance? I asked. The galaxy is full of developing civilizations. Why dedicate prime research resources to this particular species? Krell made a sound that I later recognized as laughter. Special? Oh, they're special, all right. They're the only known species in the galaxy that actively works against its own survival. The Galactic Council finds them educational. Educational? Yes, Krell said, his primary eyes narrowing while his secondary set scanned the data streams. They serve as a perfect example of what not to do. And so began my assignment, observing humans in their natural habitat. The Council had established strict non-interference protocols, allowing us to walk among them, using molecular displacement technology that rendered us virtually identical to humans in appearance. The technology was so advanced that it even replicated human biological functions, a detail I found distressingly unnecessary, but was assured was essential for maintaining our cover to my first deployment was to a place called New York City. The sensory overload was immediate and overwhelming. The cacophony of sounds, the pungent smells, the visual chaos of movement and light. It was like being thrust into a supernova, except less organized. The density of human bodies moving with seemingly random purpose made our most crowded spaceport seem like a desolate moon by comparison. Watch where you are going, buddy. A human barked after colliding with me on what they called a sidewalk. His face contorted into what my training indicated was an expression of irritation. I apologize, I said, still adjusting to the vocal apparatus of my human form. The sensation of pushing air through vibrating membranes to produce sound seemed absurdly primitive compared to our direct telepathic communication. The human squinted at me. Tourist, huh? Word of advice. Walk faster or get out of the way. Some of us have places to be. And that, dear students, was my first lesson about humans. They were always in a hurry, yet remarkably inefficient with their time. This particular human would, according to my scan, spend approximately 43% of his day engaged in what they termed social media scrolling, staring at illuminated rectangles while their neurochemical reward systems were manipulated for the profit of distant corporations. During my initial weeks on Earth, I documented their habits meticulously. Humans spend approximately 1/3 of their short lives unconscious, a state they called sleep. Another third was devoted to acquiring resources they called money, which they then exchanged for substances, experiences, or objects that provided temporary satisfaction. The remaining third was spent complaining about the first 2/3. They are so fragile, I remarked to my colleague Vreen during our daily report transmission. We met in a human dwelling known as a coffee shop, establishments where humans consumed stimulant-laced beverages while pretending to be productive on their primitive computational devices. Vreen had been stationed in a region called Tokyo and had developed an affinity for a human concoction called sushi, sections of raw marine organisms wrapped in vegetation. Vreen was consuming some during our meeting, an unnecessary commitment to her cover identity that the mission commander had repeatedly cautioned against. Physically fragile, yes, Vreen agreed, dabbing a green substance called wasabi onto her food unit. A simple fall can break their support structures. Exposure to moderate temperature variations can kill them. They're constantly battling microscopic organisms that invade their bodies. But that's not what makes them truly fragile. What does? I asked, sipping a beverage called espresso that humans use to temporarily increase their cognitive function, another peculiar weakness of their design. Their minds, Vreen said, lowering her voice, although none of the humans around us could comprehend our true communication frequencies embedded within our seemingly normal conversation. They create elaborate belief systems, then wage wars over whose imaginary construct is more valid. They divide themselves based on pigmentation variations, geographical origin, and resource acquisition success. They know their planet has finite resources, yet they extract and consume as if they have access to multiple worlds. I found this assessment accurate but incomplete. During my observations, I discovered something that both fascinated and perplexed me. Humans possessed extraordinary capacity for contradictory behaviors. Their cognitive architecture seemed uniquely designed to compartmentalize conflicting information without resolution, a characteristic that proved simultaneously their greatest strength and ultimate downfall. Take, for example, Dr. Samantha Cooper. I observed her in what humans called a laboratory, where she worked tirelessly to develop solutions for climate stabilization. Her intelligence was remarkable for a species so young, her dedication admirable. One day, after making a significant breakthrough in carbon sequestration technology, she's celebrated by driving a petroleum-powered vehicle to purchase animal protein that had been transported thousands of miles, packaged in synthetic materials that would remain intact for centuries. When I pointed out this contradiction during a casual conversation, maintaining my cover as Professor Thomas Williams from Sweden, she displayed the human emotion of defensiveness. "We can't all be perfect," she said, her facial capillaries dilating slightly in what my training identified as embarrassment. "Individual actions don't matter as much as systemic change. Besides, I have earned a little break, don't you think? I have been working 70-hour weeks, trying to save the planet. But aren't systems composed of individuals?" I asked, "and doesn't each individual action either reinforce or challenge the existing system?" She stared at me for 7.2 seconds, longer than the typical human attention span. "You sound like my ex-husband. Are you one of those eco-fundamentalists? Because if you're going to lecture me about my carbon footprint while the 100 largest corporations on Earth are responsible for over 70% of global emissions, you can save your breath." This interaction taught me another crucial aspect of human nature: their remarkable ability to compartmentalize information. They could simultaneously hold knowledge about their actions' consequences while proceeding with those very actions. When confronted with this dissonance, they wouldn't adjust their behavior, but would instead generate justifications that allowed the dissonance to persist. The following year, I was reassigned to monitor a human named Jackson Quinn, a powerful decision-maker in what they called a corporation. This particular corporation extracted a substance called oil from beneath Earth's surface, refined it, and distributed it as energy. The extraction process released compounds that trapped thermal energy in the atmosphere, a fact known to Quinn's corporation for over 50 years, according to their internal documents. Quinn lived in a coastal mansion valued at many millions of their currency units, despite scientific consensus that the area would be underwater within decades due to the very products his corporation produced. The dwelling was an architectural marvel, with extensive use of materials harvested from rapidly diminishing forests and energy requirements that exceeded those of entire villages in less developed regions. "The market will adapt," he told his colleagues during a meeting I observed after infiltrating a security team. My cover identity as Marcus Johnson had been accepted without question another indication of humans' limited perceptual capabilities. Besides, I will be dead before the worst of it hits. That's the next generation's problem. Our obligation is to our shareholders this quarter. That statement, I will be dead before the worst of it hits, became a recurring theme in my observations. Humans operated on timescales limited by their biological lifespans, rarely considering consequences beyond their own existence. This temporal myopia was perhaps their most significant evolutionary disadvantage. They simply couldn't conceive of time in the way spacefaring civilizations must have. In the third year of my mission, I witnessed what humans called political polarization. Two dominant groups opposed each other on virtually every issue, even when objective reality contradicted both positions. They had developed sophisticated technology for instantaneous global communication, yet primarily used it to distribute manipulated information and images of juvenile felines. The polarization manifested in every aspect of human society. Climate data became politically aligned, with acceptance or rejection determined not by evidence, but by group identity. Pandemic responses followed similar divisions, with simple protective measures becoming symbols of tribal affiliation rather than public health necessities. They're doomed, aren't they? I asked Captain Krell during our quarterly assessment meeting. We convened in a secure quantum bubble beneath what humans called the Pacific Ocean, one of the few locations where we could temporarily abandon our human forms and exist in our natural state. Krell's expression shifted to what I'd come to recognize as contemplation, his chromatophores cycling through shades of purple and gold. The Council's predictive models give them a 12.7% chance of survival beyond the next century. Better odds than the Zarkans had, and they pulled through. The Zarkans developed transcendental consciousness, I pointed out, extending my sensory filaments to better absorb Krell's quantum emissions. Humans are still arguing about whether their planetary climate is changing despite overwhelming evidence. They are burning while debating the existence of fire. True, Krell admitted, his appendages forming the geometric pattern that signified resignation in Praxian body language. But humans have something unusual: resilience through creativity. They have survived ice ages, pandemics, and their own violent tendencies. Don't underestimate them. I took Krell's advice and refocused my observations, looking for signs of this supposed resilience. I found Alex Novak, a young human who had developed a neural interface that allowed direct communication between human brains and artificial intelligence systems. The technology had potential to revolutionize decision-making by bypassing cognitive biases that had plagued human problem-solving since their emergence as a species. Alex worked from a repurposed warehouse in a region called Portland, surrounded by both cutting-edge technology and curious artifacts of human culture, string lights, indoor vegetation, and nostalgic images from humanity's brief space exploration era. The contradiction was striking, reaching for the stars while clinging to the past. The problem with humans, Alex told me during an interview for my cover identity as a technology journalist, is that we evolved to survive on the savannah, not to comprehend exponential growth or act collectively on a planetary scale. Our brains are running outdated software on impressive hardware. This interface could help us think differently, help us perceive complex systems the way we perceive a predator in tall grass. Alex demonstrated the technology, allowing me to observe the neural patterns as they synchronized with the AI system. The potential was extraordinary. Humans augmenting their limited cognitive architecture with computational systems designed specifically to address their blind spots. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope for these strange, contradictory creatures. The hope was short-lived. 6 months later, Alex's technology was acquired by a corporation that specialized in entertainment and advertising. Instead of addressing humanity's existential challenges, the neural interface was repurposed to deliver more effective consumer manipulation. Humans could now receive personalized promotional content directly into their consciousness, creating desire pathways that bypassed rational evaluation entirely. It's what the market demanded, Alex said when I confronted him. The light in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by resignation tinged with rationalization. Besides, we have secured funding to explore applications in climate engineering. The entertainment applications are just subsidizing the important work. The promised climate applications never materialized. Instead, The technology accelerated humanity's descent into what they called personalized reality bubbles, where each human received information that reinforced their existing beliefs, regardless of accuracy. By the time I filed my report on the technology's evolution, humans were more divided than ever, now experiencing fundamentally different versions of reality based on their preference profiles. In my 5th year, the Galactic Council expanded our mission parameters. We were authorized to make limited contact with selected humans who showed potential for catalyzing positive change. My subject was Dr. Josephine Wang, a brilliant systems theorist who had developed a framework for global resource management that mirrored early-stage Galactic Council approaches to Dr. Wang worked from a modest dwelling in a region experiencing increasing water scarcity, a deliberate choice, she explained, to remain connected to the consequences of human actions. Her living space was filled with physical information storage units called books and computational models running on renewable energy systems she had designed herself. Your models are remarkably similar to those used by advanced civilizations, I told her, after revealing aspects of my true identity. The Council had approved this disclosure after determining that Dr. Wang's psychological profile indicated a 98.7% probability of constructive response to first contact, to her credit. Dr. Wang took the revelation of extraterrestrial contact with admirable composure. After 73 seconds of stunned silence, her first question was not about our physiology or technology, but our social structures. "So we are on the right track?" she asked, her voice steady despite the existential implications of our conversation. "Theoretically, I mean. The approach is sound. The theory is sound," I confirmed, allowing a partial revelation of my true form as a gesture of trust. "The implementation, however, requires changing human behavior on a massive scale," she finished my thought. "Nearly impossible without some kind of global catastrophe as a catalyst. Humans don't change course until they hit the iceberg. Your species doesn't need to learn everything the hard way," I suggested. "The historical records of civilizations that transcended their planetary limitations show patterns of preemptive adaptation." Dr. Wang's laughter contained no humor. "Have you met humans? Learning the hard way is our specialty. We are like children who have to touch the hot stove despite every warning." In the subsequent months, Dr. Wang assembled a team of forward-thinking humans to implement regional demonstrations of her resource management system. The results were promising. Participating communities reduced waste by 78%, increased overall well-being metrics by 54%, and significantly lowered their environmental impact while maintaining technological development trajectories. Then came what humans called the backlash. Powerful entities with vested interests in the status quo launched a coordinated campaign against Dr. Wang and her team. They were labeled as anti-freedom, anti-prosperity, and, most bizarrely, anti-human. Death threats followed. Funding disappeared. Participating communities were systematically undermined through regulatory obstacles and resource restrictions. "This is why we can't have nice things," Dr. Wang said during our final meeting, using a human expression I'd come to appreciate for its simplicity and accuracy. "The system is designed to resist meaningful change. The system was created by humans," I reminded her. "It can be changed by humans. In theory, yes. In practice." She gestured vaguely at the window, where protesters carried signs denouncing her as an enemy of prosperity. "We have built a machine that none of us can control. The economy demands growth on a finite planet. Politics demands short-term thinking. And most humans are too focused on daily survival to consider civilizational survival. By my 7th year on Earth, the Galactic Council had downgraded humanity's survival probability to 3.9%. The signs of collapse were accelerating. Coastal cities battled increasingly frequent flooding. Agricultural regions faced unprecedented droughts. Resource wars had broken out in multiple territories. The migration of displaced populations triggered xenophobic responses rather than cooperation. What humans called their global economy began to fracture under these pressures. Supply chains that had once seemed unbreakably resilient revealed their fundamental fragility. Food production systems optimized for efficiency rather than resilience failed under changing conditions. Energy infrastructure dependent on stable climate patterns became increasingly unreliable. It's as if they want to destroy themselves, Vreen observed during our final mission briefing. 7 years of Earth observation had changed her. She had developed what our psychologists termed empathic attachment to the subjects of her study. The recommended treatment was temporally accelerated grief processing, but Vreen had declined the procedure. They don't want destruction, I corrected, reviewing the holographic projections of Earth's cascading system failures. They simply can't overcome their programming. Short-term benefit over long-term survival. Individual advantage over collective welfare. Present certainty over future possibility. What a waste, Captain Krell said, genuine sadness in his voice. They created such beautiful things. And that was true. During my time on Earth, I had experienced what humans called music, vibrations arranged in patterns that somehow conveyed emotions across their biological limitations. I had seen their art, visual representations that captured aspects of experience in ways our more advanced species had never considered. I had read their literature, narrative constructions that expanded the boundaries of imagination. In these creative endeavors, I glimpsed what humans could have become if only they had directed that creativity toward their collective survival. Their capacity for pattern recognition, metaphorical thinking, and emotional resonance could have been harnessed for unprecedented problem solving. Instead, these gifts were primarily channeled into entertainment and distraction. Beautiful, but ultimately inconsequential in the face of existential threats. The end, when it came, arrived both suddenly and predictably. Multiple cascading system failures, ecological, economic, political, converge in what humans might poetically call a perfect storm. The specifics aren't important for this lecture. The archives contain the full ecological societal collapse timeline for those interested in technical details. What matters is that, as their civilization crumbled, humans demonstrated one final contradiction. Their capacity for both tremendous cruelty and extraordinary compassion increased in equal measure. I observed humans fighting over dwindling resources, exploiting the vulnerable, and retreating into tribal enclaves. But I also witnessed acts of sacrifice, cooperation, and generosity that defied evolutionary logic. Humans giving their last food portions to strangers. Communities organizing to protect the vulnerable. Former enemies cooperating to preserve knowledge for a future they knew they wouldn't live to see. In the final days, I met with Noah Patel, one of the few humans who had managed to develop a sustainable community in the chaos. His compound housed 300 humans of diverse origins, ages, and skill sets. They had implemented many of Dr. Wang's principles, creating a microcosm of what human civilization could have been on a larger scale. We knew this was coming, Noah said as we watched the sun set over their agricultural zone. The community had developed sophisticated permaculture systems that required minimal external inputs, an approach that would have been dismissed as impractical in the previous economic paradigm, but now represented one of the few viable food production methods. All the warning signs were there. The science was clear. We just couldn't change course. Why not? I asked, though I'd studied this question for years. Your species demonstrated remarkable adaptability in other contexts. You survived ice ages with stone tools. You overcame plagues. You explored your world and even ventured briefly beyond it. What made this challenge different? Noah considered before answering, his weathered face reflecting the golden light of Earth's lone star. Imagine you are on a starship headed toward a black hole. You can clearly see it ahead. The ship's computer confirms you will reach the event horizon in 100 years. But changing course requires everyone on the ship to accept a 20% reduction in living standards for a decade. How do you convince people to sacrifice immediate comfort for a distant threat? By appealing to reason, I suggested. The evidence is clear. The trajectory is certain. The math is unambiguous. Noah's laughter echoed across the compound. Reason? Humans aren't rational creatures pretending to have emotions. We are emotional creatures pretending to be rational. We use reason to justify what our emotions have already decided. That insight, more than any scientific analysis, explained humanity's trajectory. That Noah's community survived longer than most, but even they succumbed eventually. Not to hunger or conflict, but to a pandemic that spread through the remnants of human civilization like cosmic fire. Their medical infrastructure had collapsed years earlier, and even simple infections became death sentences. The pandemic itself was a direct consequence of ecological disruption, another predictable outcome that humans had failed to prevent despite ample warning. The final transmission I received from Earth came from a young human named Zara, broadcasting for what had once been a prestigious university. She had never known the civilization at its peak, having been born during its decline. Her message was transmitted on multiple frequencies, a desperate attempt to reach anyone who might be listening. If anyone is listening, her message began, we had so much. We knew so much. We could have been so much more. Learn from us. Choose differently. The transmission ended with a digital archive, a compressed collection of human knowledge, art, and history. The Galactic Council has preserved this archive as a testament to what humans called potential, the gap between what could be and what was. And that, young students, is why we study humans today. Not because they achieved greatness, but because they glimpsed it and turned away. Not because they conquered the stars, but because they could have. Their story serves as a cosmic warning. Intelligence without wisdom leads to extinction. Technology without foresight becomes the architect of destruction. Knowledge without action transforms potential into tragedy. As you leave this lecture hall and return to your respective worlds, remember the humans. Remember how their individual choices accumulated into collective fate. Remember how they called themselves the dominant species while undermining the very systems that sustained them. Remember that they called humans fragile creatures, not because of their physical limitations, but because of their psychological ones. And most importantly, remember that intelligence is common in our universe. Wisdom is not class dismissed.